The doctor shut the door behind me, the lock clicking softly, a sound that somehow made my stomach twist even more than the queasy flutter that pregnancy brought with it. I hadn't expected today to feel like a courtroom drama disguised as a checkup, yet here I was, clutching my coat over my bump, watching him fumble with the files in his hands, his fingers trembling, voice low, almost a whisper. "You need to see this. Now." The words didn't explain anything, yet the weight in them made my chest tighten. My heart skipped, a cold dread creeping in. He lifted a folder, the kind with the thick, glossy cover hospitals always use for patient confidentiality, and it trembled slightly as he set it on the counter. "Your marital situation. It's changed," he said, each word deliberate, slow, causing a pit to form in my stomach that had nothing to do with morning sickness. I blinked, unsure if I heard right, if this was even real. The hum of fluorescent lights overhead suddenly seemed loud, buzzing in a way that made my ears ache. Outside, the lobby chatter muted in my mind, replaced by the thudding of my own pulse. My eyes flicked to the doorway, almost hoping, irrationally, that he was joking. But the serious set of his jaw, the subtle shaking of his hands as he closed the folder, told a story louder than words. And then I remembered not Daniel, my husband's aftershave, the faint scent that always clung to him, even in his crisp work shirts, reminding me that he had been here, in my life, always present, always charming, always calculating. A small bitter chuckle escaped my lips, though it sounded hollow even to me. How convenient it had all seemed, the pregnancy, the timing, the way he smiled when I told him. He had nodded, eyes warm, but there had always been that flicker, that shadow in them that never quite reached affection. I remember the night he filed for divorce, papers served neatly on the table while I had been asleep, unaware, trusting, and completely, impossibly calm. The papers had been precise, cold, professional, almost a business transaction rather than the shattering of a marriage. No yelling, no theatrics, just legal inevitability staring back at me. My stomach twisted again, remembering the way his smile had not faltered once, even as my world shifted beneath me. And yet, the doctor's expression, fraught with unease, hinted at a secret even he wasn't entirely comfortable revealing, something that could change everything. My mind raced. What did he know that I didn't? I pressed my hand to my belly, feeling the subtle movement of the baby, a life I had been nurturing quietly, safely, in the midst of all the controlled chaos. I had learned to keep my composure, to walk through this house of mirrors he had created, where every document, every signed paper, every financial decision seemed prearranged to benefit him while leaving me oblivious. The memory of his words, always so calculated, came back. The casual phrases about standard procedure, logistics, insurance adjustments, his calm insistence that I trust him without question. He had always believed he was smarter than everyone in the room, and perhaps he still did, but this, whatever was in that file, could undo him. The doctor stepped closer, lowering his voice further, eyes flicking briefly to the door as if checking for listeners, his hand brushing over the folder like it contained a bomb. "You have to know," he whispered. "This isn't just paperwork, it's evidence, and he has no idea." The words sank into me like ice water. Evidence. My pulse raced. My thoughts jumped backward, tracing the months, the subtle manipulations, the hidden clauses, the sudden insistence on signing forms without reading, the veiled comments about tax benefits and liabilities, the meticulous planning that had seemed innocuous at the time, but now looked like a map laid out in shadow. I sank into the chair, trying to steady my breathing. 21 weeks pregnant, navigating the fatigue and nausea, and now facing a revelation that could alter the trajectory of my life entirely. The walls of the examination room seemed to close in, the sterile smell of antiseptic mingling with the familiar scent of the paper in the folder. I felt a flicker of fear, calm, restrained, the kind that sharpens your senses rather than paralyzes. I had been careful, cautious, observant, but never confrontational, and now all those habits became my armor. My mind wandered to the beginning, how everything seemed so perfect. Him, charming and composed, always ensuring that appearances remained intact, while behind the smile, a network of financial and emotional control spread unseen. The pregnancy, once a joyous moment, now carried a complicated weight, manipulated in timing to appear convenient, perhaps even binding me closer to him, unaware of the traps beneath. I recalled moments when he would hand me documents with a casual smile, urging me, "Just sign this, it's standard," never explaining, never letting me question, yet always ensuring compliance. I had followed blindly, trusting the love I believed, the stability I had assumed, and the warmth that now felt like a veneer over meticulous strategy. The folder on the counter seemed heavier with implication than with paper. I glanced at the doctor again, noting the subtle twitch in his eye, the tremor in his fingers as they hovered over the files. There was urgency there, a warning I couldn't ignore. He was not a man given to theatrics. His caution suggested the magnitude of what I held in my hands, documents that could unravel years of manipulation, contracts that revealed more than intentions, financial evidence tied to the divorce, to our insurance, to the timing of my pregnancy, to liabilities hidden behind the charming facade my husband had perfected. A memory flickered of my friend, the one I confided in during quiet moments of exhaustion and doubt, her voice echoing in my head, urging me to notice inconsistencies, to question the routine, to trust my instincts. And yet there had been another figure, seeming supportive, always present at the edges, a comfort that now felt like a misdirection, someone who would vanish when the storm truly hit. I exhaled slowly, placing both hands on my belly, letting the tiny movements of the baby ground me. The doctor's whispered insistence lingered. Evidence. He would not elaborate now, leaving me to piece together the reality. I realized that the divorce filing was not a personal vendetta alone. It was structured, calculated, entwined with finances, insurance adjustments, and the precise coldness of legal maneuvering. The papers had arrived with efficiency, without emotion, yet behind them lay a vulnerability my husband had overlooked. My eyes swept the room again, taking in the sterile light, the faint hum of medical machinery, the clock ticking with deceptive normalcy. Time, I realized, was both my adversary and my ally. Every day of patience, every quiet observation, every document I had not signed blindly could now be the key to reclaiming control. I felt a calm determination rise, the slow burn of strategy forming in my mind. He had moved first, believing victory, yet he was unaware that the evidence existed outside his perception, waiting to shift the balance. The doctor finally straightened, placing the folder in front of me, his hands steadying, eyes locking with mine for a fleeting second. "Be careful," he said simply. "He doesn't know what's here, but if he did..." The threat was implicit, unspoken, yet more potent than any shouted accusation. I nodded, understanding not just the gravity, but the opportunity. My hands rested on the folder, feeling the weight of truth and justice intertwined, a tangible reminder that silence and patience could outmaneuver arrogance and charm. And just as the initial shock began to settle, my mind traced forward to the papers served while I was sleeping, the cold precision of legal filing, the absence of confrontation, the utter efficiency of a man who believed control was absolute. Now, I realized, control had a loophole, a crack in the armor he never considered. I wasn't reacting with hysteria, wasn't panicking, my pulse steady, eyes clear, mind focused. Observation had taught me strategy, restraint had honed preparation. The next steps were mine to orchestrate, quietly, methodically. The weight of the folder, the doctor's trembling voice, the faint echo of aftershave in memory, the calculated calm of my husband, the intricate dance of documents, insurance policies, and hidden clauses, all converged into a single realization. I had been given a chance to rewrite this narrative before the storm fully landed. I glanced down at the papers spread across the kitchen counter, my hand resting gently on the swell of my belly. The morning sunlight slants through the blinds, highlighting the neat precision of our home, a stark contrast to the unease settling in my chest. I remember the early days when his charm felt effortless, Michael always had a way of making even the smallest gestures seem thoughtful. Coffee mugs arranged just so, a hand on my back during movie nights, a subtle laugh that always carried warmth. Back then, I thought I had found stability, someone whose calm demeanor meant we could weather any storm. It was only later that I realized how deliberate that calmness was, a calculated veneer that masked a mind always 2 steps ahead, in control and planning. The subtle shifts began almost imperceptibly. Documents left on the table with the phrase, "Just sign it, it's standard," became a quiet ritual. I remember looking at the fine print once, the curl of the ink on a signature line, and feeling a small pang of unease. Michael brushed off my questions with his signature smirk, the kind that suggested I was overthinking something that was perfectly normal. And yet, my instincts nudged me, whispering that trust could sometimes disguise manipulation. I started paying attention to the tiniest inconsistencies, the dates on insurance claims that didn't line up, the way his eyes flickered when certain financial topics came up, the subtle tone shifts when I questioned his logic. Pregnancy added a new layer to the tension. My body was fatigued in ways that weren't just physical. Sore muscles, restless nights, heartbeats quickened by sudden worries. I moved slowly, deliberately, learning to navigate each day with caution. I noticed how Michael never once touched any paperwork I was handling, how he seemed to hover nearby, asking calm, controlled questions that sounded caring, but were designed to gauge my reactions. During one late evening, I found a document slipped beneath a folder marked Trusts and Liabilities, a waiver requiring my signature. My hand trembled as I read, not from fear of the contract itself, but from the realization that his attention to minute legal structures was part of a larger strategy. Not everything was obvious at first. Claire, my best friend since college, seemed to offer support, a mirror to my emotions. She would call in the evenings, her voice warm, gently coaxing me to share the day's frustrations. And yet, sometimes her advice felt strangely detached, as though she had been coached to maintain a veneer of empathy. I dismissed the doubt at first. Pregnancy can make you suspicious, she always said. But small moments began to accumulate. Her laughter a beat too early, her subtle redirection whenever I mentioned Michael's latest insistence on standard documents. She became a reflection not just of comfort, but also of caution, forcing me to question whether trust should ever be blind. Michael's patterns became predictable. Financial secrecy, hidden liabilities, subtle legal maneuvers cloaked as routine. I remember evenings when he would instruct me on health insurance adjustments, phrasing them carefully. These are just procedural, nothing to worry about. But the repetition, the meticulous attention to minor details made me pause. Something about the meticulous precision screamed foresight, and I began quietly compiling notes, capturing screenshots, filing copies, silent documentation that I alone would understand. The pregnancy made each step heavier, but it also sharpened my focus. Protecting this life inside me became the priority over any confrontation or argument. A faint memory resurfaces of an evening when Michael handed me an envelope with a neatly embossed seal, his eyes almost apologetic, a smile playing on his lips. I opened it to find a statement of joint assets, precise and sterile. "Just standard procedure," he murmured, but I saw the timing didn't align with our actual investments. The dates were off, signatures smudged in ways that a careless eye might miss. My pulse quickened, not out of panic, but with realization. I was beginning to read the code beneath the surface. I started noticing the micro errors in every document, the small discrepancies he assumed I would overlook, the hidden strategy behind every calm phrase. By mid-pregnancy, the emotional landscape had shifted. I was exhausted, yes, physically and emotionally, but I had learned the rhythm of silence, the cadence of strategic observation. Michael maintained his polished exterior, smiling in the mornings, leaving coffee waiting just the way I liked it, while the underlying currents moved like a quiet tide. The quietness of our interactions became a lesson in patience. Every controlled smile, every deliberate pause was a window into his methods. I realized I had to outpace him not with confrontation, but with preparation, observing every move, every subtle misalignment in paperwork, every financial red flag that betrayed his intentions. The first glaring inconsistency finally presented itself in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon. I was organizing medical bills when I noticed an insurance claim from 2 weeks prior with dates that contradicted the doctor's records. My heart tightened, not in shock, but in precise understanding. Michael's strategy was revealing itself piece by piece, layer by layer, and I was quietly cataloging it all. This was no emotional outburst. It was a measured awareness, the kind that sets the stage for calculated action. I could feel the tension of anticipation coiling like a spring, waiting for the right moment to unwind. Pregnancy exhaustion mingled with the clarity of observation. My days became a balance of careful rest, watching, noting, silently strategizing. Even in small domestic routines, the arrangement of files on the counter, the folding of laundry, the ordering of groceries, I observed patterns, tracing back to financial implications, legal maneuvers, and his meticulous control over appearances. I noticed how Michael avoided certain discussions, the slight hesitation before passing a document, the careful, rehearsed tone in casual conversations. Each micro detail was a piece of a puzzle that only I had the patience and perspective to assemble. By the end of part 2, the quiet red flags had coalesced into a pattern impossible to ignore. A single line in the insurance paperwork contradicted prior medical advice, a minor signature discrepancy hinted at unilateral decisions, and the calculated timing of his divorce filing, though not known to me yet, loomed like a distant storm. I had learned the rhythm of his calm manipulations, cataloged the subtle traps, and most importantly, developed a protective shield for myself and the life growing inside me. It was not fear that guided me, nor panic. It was awareness, strategy, and an unspoken resolve to reclaim control over the narrative of my life.
Fluorescent lights humming overhead as I clutch the folder the doctor handed me. Dr. Harper's hands shake slightly as she closes the office door behind me, her voice barely above a whisper. You need to see this before he does. My heartbeat accelerates, not with fear for myself, but for the life growing inside me, for the child whose future now teeters on invisible scales of signed papers and hidden depths. I flip the first page and freeze. There, meticulously typed, are transaction logs, insurance claims, and trust documents that make my pulse hitch. One account shows an unreported liability of $83,246 tied directly to my husband's name, but funneled through an LLC I had never been told existed. Each line, each decimal, each signature screams manipulation. I remember the dinner 2 months ago when he slid a stack of documents across the marble kitchen island, smirking, "Just sign this, it's standard, nothing for you to worry about." I had hesitated, my instincts pricking, but his charm smoothed over my doubts. I'd never imagined it was a veiled strategy, a trap to frame our marriage around finance, not love. Flipping further, I noticed dates that don't align with our hospital visits, billing codes misaligned with my prenatal care. The timing of his divorce filing now makes grotesque sense. He's weaponized our life against us. My stomach knots, not with fear, but with the cold clarity of realization. Dr. Harper hands me a sealed envelope, her eyes darting nervously to the closed door. Inside, there are copies of medical records that contradict the statements my husband submitted to the insurance company. Each ultrasound, each lab report, each prenatal check note is stamped, signed, and verifiable. He doesn't know I have this. No one outside this office does. My mind shifts from shock to strategy. There is no screaming, no dramatic confrontation here, only careful, deliberate planning. I tuck the envelope into my purse, the weight of evidence heavy but empowering. This is my shield, my sword, my silent counterattack. I spend hours cross-referencing the documents, tracing wire transfers, checking bank statements, and verifying signatures. A hidden debt emerges, $29,560, disguised as a loan to a shell company, but effectively extracted from our joint assets. I pieced together how he exploited the timing of my pregnancy, knowing I would be physically and emotionally vulnerable, to file for divorce and retain control over the finances. Yet, in his overconfidence, he left breadcrumbs. His arrogance ensures the trap is visible to those who know where to look. I feel no panic, only the calm, meticulous fire of preparation. Evenings are spent in quiet reconnaissance, observing his patterns, confirming ally betrayals. My friend Claire, once a mirror of concern, has begun distancing herself, subtle, almost imperceptible hints that she aligns elsewhere. And yet, my lawyer, Michael, becomes a quiet force beside me, guiding without pushing, validating each document, each strategy. My husband calls repeatedly, confident in his own victory, blind to the silent accumulation of proof I now command. His charm, once disarming, now seems brittle against the paper trail I have reconstructed. The micro-twists reveal themselves like a sequence of dominoes, an insurance waiver unsigned on his part, an audit pending because of the shell accounts, a trust fund with discrepancies between state filings and bank records. Each discovery adds layers of security around the truth. The pregnancy, once a point of manipulation, is now the axis around which the evidence pivots. Everything he assumed he controlled slips quietly, inevitably, into my hands. I do not rush, I do not shout. I catalog, verify, and prepare for the moment when the exposure will be not theatrical, but absolute. By night, the office is empty save for the hum of fluorescent lights. Papers spread around me like a map of inevitability. I mark critical sections with post-its, dollar amounts, dates, legal clauses, signatures. My husband is unaware, drinking his confidence in some dimly lit bar or at the gym, oblivious to the quiet unraveling of his plan. The final twist comes almost poetically. A payment that should have cleared weeks ago is flagged in my bank statement, an automatic reversal scheduled without his knowledge, directly tied to the misaligned trust document. It is subtle, yet fatal in its implications. The dominoes are aligned. His overconfidence is now the instrument of his collapse. In the final hours of preparation, I feel the calmest I have since discovering the first discrepancy. The proof exists. Every wire transfer, every medical record, every hidden liability is documented and verifiable. He thinks he's won. He doesn't know who holds the leverage. I am no longer reacting. I am orchestrating. My body, though heavy with the child, is strong with purpose. My mind, sharp and controlled, guides the next steps. The legal trap is complete, and I, silent and unshaken, am ready to watch it spring.
The office smelled faintly of polished wood and paper, the kind of sterility that whispered authority. I entered silently, my heels barely audible against the hardwood floor, and the lawyer at the corner looked up, eyes widening slightly as if she sensed the quiet storm I carried. Stacks of medical records, insurance statements, and notarized documents lay arranged like soldiers awaiting orders. I moved carefully, placing each file in a precise order, my mind ticking through every liability clause, every waiver, every subtle loophole he had tried to exploit. Outside, the city carried on, oblivious to the delicate chess game unfolding behind these walls. I paused at the conference table where the sealed audit documents had been waiting. The clerk who had handed them over glanced nervously at me, clearly aware of the tension, yet unsure of its source. Every signature here, every line of fine print had been collected months in advance, unnoticed by anyone but me. The doctor had sent a follow-up report the previous evening, noting the exact discrepancies in billing and medical dates that would unravel his confident facade. My fingers traced the highlighted portions, mentally rehearsing the sequence in which each revelation would be deployed. He called again that morning, his voice calm, polished, and unaware of the trap forming behind these office doors. I listened, noting the ease with which he attempted to manipulate the narrative, how certain he was of his own victory. Little did he know that a quiet army of evidence stood ready to dismantle every carefully constructed lie. Each call, each boastful statement he made was recorded, logged, time-stamped, additional proof that would be wielded silently but devastatingly. His arrogance had blinded him to the methodical preparation that was my true strength.
The lawyer leaned in, whispering updates on legal filings and upcoming hearings, her demeanor calm yet urgent. I absorbed every word, calculating every possible scenario, considering the timing of submissions, the sequence of disclosures. The air was thick with anticipation, not of drama or spectacle, but of inevitability. My child's future, my dignity, and the quiet justice I sought were all folded into these motions, each step meticulously synchronized. Outside, the hospital and city remained oblivious, but here, inside these walls, patience had become a weapon sharper than any shout or confrontation. A soft knock at the door drew my attention. The false supporter, the one I had once trusted, lingered awkwardly in the threshold. Their expression faltered as they realized the magnitude of the files laid before me, the web of documentation and quiet preparation that left no room for escape. I said nothing, only nodded for them to leave, and they disappeared, the door clicking softly behind them. The absence of their presence strengthened the calm, ordered momentum, leaving only the allies and proofs that mattered, all aligned against the man who had underestimated both me and the system. I reviewed the bank statements next, tracing hidden transfers, unreported debts, and sudden withdrawals that coincided with the timeline of his divorce filing. Each dollar, each number, was a thread connecting back to the narrative he had hoped would remain untouchable. The doctor's records, cross-referenced with insurance codes and billing dates, revealed a pattern of manipulation he had assumed no one would notice. I leaned back in my chair, breathing evenly, letting the precision of preparation sink in. The collapse was coming, but it would be quiet, calculated, undeniable. Minutes passed like hours as I organized evidence for the court filings. Every micro-twist, hidden liabilities, forged waivers, insurance inconsistencies, was cataloged and highlighted. I envisioned the courtroom scene, not as a stage for drama, but as a theater of truth, each document a silent witness to his unraveling. The lawyer checked her notes against mine, and for the first time I allowed a faint sense of satisfaction to settle in. This was the culmination of months of observation, documentation, and silent strategizing. The man's calls became more frequent, increasingly sharp, yet still cloaked in politeness. I ignored them, focusing on the filings that would quietly dismantle his image of control. A sealed envelope contained the medical evidence that directly contradicted his narrative, proof that no charm or coercion could negate. I placed it carefully in the folder marked for immediate submission to the court, knowing that once opened, the facade he had relied upon would crumble under the weight of quiet, methodical truth. Even as I prepared, I maintained the calm I had cultivated from the beginning, my body reflecting neither anxiety nor haste. Each decision, each filing was deliberate. The allies, lawyer and doctor, moved in synchronized professional rhythm, reinforcing the inevitability of exposure. Outside, life continued unaware, but inside, the meticulous orchestration of justice proceeded with unrelenting precision. Every paper, every record, every silent strategy was a note in the symphony of quiet collapse I conducted. Finally, I laid out the final set of documents on the desk, aligning them for submission. The man's confidence, his smooth veneer of invincibility, remained entirely intact in his own perception. Little did he know that the slow, invisible mechanisms of evidence, authority, and patience had already begun to operate. In this quiet room, surrounded by papers and careful allies, the stage was set. No confrontation, no shouting, no spectacle, only the inexorable, precise collapse of a man undone by his own arrogance and my careful vigilance.
The office was quiet, the hum of the air conditioning blending with the soft tick of the wall clock. I sat at the edge of the polished table, my hands lightly touching the neatly stacked files before me, each one carefully labeled with dates, numbers, and signatures that confirmed every detail I had quietly collected over the past weeks. My focus was absolute. There was no rush, no panic, only the steady, deliberate rhythm of preparation. Outside, the late afternoon sunlight poured through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the room, mirroring the weight of the truths that were about to unfold. I glanced at the sealed envelope in my hand, containing the final piece of evidence, the insurance audit, medical timelines, and notarized affidavits that proved every inconsistency my husband had tried to conceal. Dr. Harper had handed it to me earlier, his expression carefully neutral, but I noticed the tension in his jaw, the brief hesitation before he closed the door behind him. He had done his part, now it was mine. The calmness I felt wasn't fear. It was a steady awareness that everything I needed to protect my child and myself was already in my possession. I allowed a slow exhale, feeling the tiniest surge of quiet confidence. The phone buzzed softly on the desk, and I watched my husband's name flash on the screen. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. His calls, frantic and clipped, were predictable by now, his composure eroding with every silent second that passed. I had given him no clues, not even a hint of the evidence waiting just beyond the threshold. Every document I had, every careful notation, every medical report, all meticulously organized, was a reflection of my patience, my observation, my refusal to react without control. My mind traced the timeline again, connecting every micro-twist, the hidden debts, the financial traps, the subtle legal manipulations he had attempted, and the way his own arrogance had made him blind to my quiet preparation. By evening, the law office was nearly empty, the hum of fluorescent lights casting a sterile glow over the rows of shelves and stacks of files. My lawyer, Miss Caldwell, approached, her steps measured, a folder in hand that contained the court filings, ready to expose the truth. She handed it to me without a word, trusting my understanding of the strategy. We were a silent team, perfectly synchronized, knowing that the moment the documents were officially submitted, the narrative would shift irreversibly. My husband had believed he could outmaneuver me through charm, intimidation, and speed, but he had underestimated the weight of silent, meticulously documented truth. Later, in the calm of my apartment, I reviewed the final confirmations from the bank and the court clerk. Everything was in place. The audits had caught the discrepancies, the waiver clauses and trusts had been clarified, and the timelines matched perfectly with the medical evidence. I allowed myself a rare smile, not triumphant, not gloating, just a serene acknowledgement of the precision with which I had safeguarded our future. My baby's life and security were ensured. I had remained composed while the trap quietly closed around my husband, his carefully curated image now vulnerable under the scrutiny of documented fact. The following morning, he arrived at the courthouse, visibly tense, a controlled veneer masking the panic beneath. I stood silently in the waiting area, reviewing the documents one last time. No yelling, no confrontation, just the immutable calm of preparation meeting inevitable consequence. As the court session began, every piece of evidence was methodically presented, the medical records, insurance audits, financial statements, all meticulously validated. He tried to interject, to regain control through charm or aggression, but each move was anticipated and neutralized by the documentation. The weight of truth was unyielding, and his composure crumbled under the quiet scrutiny of legal authority. Hours later, it was over. The judge's final decision was concise, calm, and absolute. My husband faced the legal consequences alone. His reputation was quietly damaged, his manipulations fully exposed. There were no dramatic speeches, no public humiliation staged for effect, only the undeniable fact that his own documents had undone him. I left the courthouse with a lightness in my chest I hadn't felt in months. My pregnancy and future were secure, my child's life protected. There was no extravagant victory, no sudden fortune, only the profound freedom of dignity, safety, and restored independence. Back in my apartment, I allowed myself to finally exhale fully, sitting by the window and watching the city bathe in the soft golden light. The baby kicked gently, a quiet reminder of the life I was nurturing. I reflected on the patience, strategy, and calm that had guided me through every step, how observing, recording, and waiting brought justice without spectacle. My life was smaller in scale, quieter in pace, yet infinitely richer in peace. I didn't need wealth to feel victory. I had reclaimed control, autonomy, and safety. I whispered softly to myself, the words grounding me. I didn't win money.
I won my life back. And in that serene moment, I realized that the best form of victory had always been subtle, deliberate, and quietly unstoppable. Everything else, the documents, the courts, the evidence, had simply reflected what I already knew. Composure and intelligence were more powerful than any act of anger, more decisive than any dramatic confrontation. Life would continue, slower and calmer, and yet it felt utterly complete. A gentle reminder to anyone listening, whether you're facing deception or betrayal, patience and meticulous preparation are forms of strength. The world may rush, manipulate, or intimidate, but quiet, controlled action can protect what truly matters. Sometimes winning isn't about spectacle, it's about reclaiming your peace and freedom.